Donald Trump is a madman, and he has created quite possibly the craziest asylum rules I have ever seen. And I am not a fan, but I will say this is 4D chess. I kid you not. The Trump administration will begin deporting asylum seekers from Mexico to Guatemala. It's an expansion of a controversial plan to stop the flow of refugees and immigrants to the U.S. southern border. Let me not bury the lead, and I'll tell you exactly what Trump is doing. If you come from Guatemala through Mexico to the United States, Trump says you must remain, I say Trump, but the Trump administration, you must remain in Mexico pending your court date. Well, one thing they've started doing, and it's weird because it's framed strangely, is they're sending some people or they're keeping them 350 miles away from their court date. Meaning if you want to go to court, you got to go to El Paso from Nogales, which is 350 miles away. This may be the most ingenious and maybe like, I don't know what's the right word. Like, I don't know how can I describe this? I'm critical of it, but here's what Trump is doing. If someone from Mexico, a Mexican citizen, comes to the U.S. and requests asylum, they fly the person to Guatemala and tell them to apply for asylum in Guatemala. Wow. This is nuts. Wow. Talk about Trump. And the argument is, well, there's two countries. You know, you're in Mexico. Why come to America? Go to Guatemala. You'll be safe there, right? Let me read you this story from BuzzFeed News. The Trump administration will now deport Mexican nationals, including families who come to the U.S. southern border seeking asylum, to Guatemala, an expansion of a controversial program that will spark outrage among advocates and lawmakers, according to documents obtained by BuzzFeed News. The program, which was signed in July, was implemented in late November. Emailed guidance was sent to asylum officials across the country in recent days, detailing how Mexicans were now to be included in the process. The plan was initially only focused in El Paso, but was later expanded to the Rio Grande Valley, according to the documents. A Department of Homeland Security spokesperson confirmed the news on Monday. Listen to this. Quote, certain Mexicans seeking humanitarian protections in the United States may now be eligible to be transferred to Guatemala and given the opportunity to seek protection there under the terms of the Guatemala Asylum Cooperative Agreement, the spokesperson said. What? Trump is a madman. Look, man, I know some people will think the way I'm describing this is a bit callous, but let me tell you this. I think if people come here and they request asylum and they have a legitimate claim, then we take them in and we help them. And if there are people coming from Mexico, we do that, but they can wait in Mexico if they're Mexican. I get it. Some people might say, yeah, but what if they're in danger? Look, man, not everywhere in Mexico is the same. So yes, they can remain in Mexico, but it doesn't mean they can just get free entry to the U.S. While, most asylum claims are canceled. But what Trump is doing here is they will be eligible for the opportunity to be sent to a country thousands of miles in the other direction. Man, that just seems brutal. They will be eligible for the opportunity. I certainly don't believe anybody in Mexico who's coming to the U.S. thinks it's an opportunity to be eligible to be sent to Guatemala. But I'll tell you what, man, Trump has figured out some crazy workarounds to these rules and these laws. And if the argument is you're not safe in Mexico, would you then be safe in Guatemala? Now, I think it's fair to point out, too, they say may be eligible. Yes, certainly if there's like a gang or something operating in both Guatemala and Mexico, you probably don't qualify. But if you're in like northern Mexico and you're in trouble, they can be like, this problem doesn't exist in Guatemala. Why don't you go there? Why does everyone want to come to America? Well, it's obvious. This country's nice. It's wealthy. Who wouldn't want to live here? Now, I'll tell you what, the GDP in Mexico, I think, is like $10,000 to $20,000. And in America, it's like 30 to 50 or something. Or no, I'm sorry. I'm talking about Mexico City. I don't know what the GDP per capita is in Mexico, but if you're working a minimum wage job in the United States at McDonald's, you're probably making more than the average Mexican. So yeah, they're willing to come here and do these jobs because the pay is better. It's not better in Guatemala. As of late December 2019, 43 asylum seekers from El Salvador and Honduras have been deported to Guatemala under the agreement. That we understand, though, according to government data obtained by BuzzFeed News. The plan was initially limited to adult asylum seekers, but was expanded to families on December 10th, according to documentation seen by BuzzFeed News. But I would also like to point out the migrant crisis is over. Nobody cares about this news anymore. It's not on Fox, not on CNN. They're talking about impeachment or Iran or something else. And now Trump is ramping things up. They say the administration says the plan is a key element in its strategy to deter migration at the border and restrict asylum seekers from entering the U.S. Advocates and asylum officers previously told BuzzFeed News that the unprecedented plan lacks legality and organization and will lead to immigrants being placed in dangerous circumstances. They say that all the time. Many of these people went home already. Listen, to quote Bernie Sanders, I was criticized, or not necessarily criticized. They say Tim Pool's political position on immigration aligns with conservatives. No, it doesn't. It aligns with Bernie Sanders, who said there are too many poor people, we can't open the border, and who voted for a border barrier and border security like 10 years ago. Okay? Right now, Bernie Sanders is saying he wants 50,000 climate refugees. I still am more likely to align with Bernie Sanders than Donald Trump. I don't like this plan. I can recognize that Trump is implementing a bunch of these very difficult processes to make it harder for asylum seekers to get in. I don't know if 50,000 is the right number, but I think if someone's a refugee or asylum seeker and they have a legitimate claim, they should be allowed to come here. That's a Bernie Sanders position. It's so insane how they try and smear everyone as like, because conservatives are concerned about immigration and so is Tim Pool, that means Tim Pool aligns with conservatives. Sorry, did you even listen to what Bernie Sanders said about it? Now, Bernie's not perfect, and he's flip-flopped. The point is, it's like the moment you say, I have issues with immigration, they go, only conservatives do. What? I'm sick and tired of it, man. In recent months, the administration has been concerned about an increase of Mexican nationals arrested at the border. In December, Ken Cuccinelli, the second in command at the Department of Homeland Security, said that Mexicans could be sent to Guatemala. Could you imagine? Could you imagine someone living in like Tijuana, going to the border and being like, I'd like to declare asylum, and right this way, so they put them on a plane and fly them to Guatemala? That's thousands of miles away. Quote, Mexico is dangerous. Guatemala is even more so. This expansion of the agreement continues to prevent legitimate asylum seekers from having their cases heard by the U.S. and foist them upon the Guatemalan system, which has about a dozen staff, said one asylum officer, who was not authorized to speak publicly on the matter. Asylum in the U.S. is now practically available only for people wealthy and privileged enough to get visas, shutting out many of the most vulnerable groups asking for help at our borders. The interviews with asylum officers determine if a person is eligible to be deported to Guatemala. The immigrants are told they will be deported to Guatemala and can obtain protections there instead of the U.S. Before this interview with an asylum officer, immigrants have no access to legal counsel, unlike their initial asylum screening. I'm gonna tell you right now, dude. This is an end run around the system. This is a federal policy that basically makes it so you can't be an asylum seeker here. I think there's a fair point to be made that if you're in danger in Mexico and that danger doesn't exist in Guatemala, then why do you have to come to America? I don't understand why people on the left are like, they should be allowed to come here. Dude, we got people from Africa flying across the world to try and come to America. That literally makes no sense. It actually does make sense that some people would be eligible to go to Guatemala instead. If you're truly concerned about your safety, economics shouldn't matter. If your life is at risk in Mexico, why come to America? You could go to Guatemala. So I think there's a fair point to be made there. I will say, however, I think you'd be a moron or a liar not to admit what this is really about is Trump just cutting down on immigration, period. 70% across the board, legal or otherwise. Now, we know most asylum seekers are not legit, and maybe then if they're found not to be, eligible in America, they get sent to Guatemala. But I think I'll say this. On its surface, the left should have no problem with this. They're not saying that if you're going to be in danger in Guatemala, we'll send you there. They're saying if you are okay and you could go there, we'll send you there. We'll help you out. On the surface, there should be no argument. I still think what the U.S. is doing is using various circuitous, difficult things to try and, stop immigration. The thing about what Trump is doing is that he's doing things in a way where you technically shouldn't be able to argue against it. Like I said, if you're going to be, economics shouldn't matter if you're talking about safety. If there's a gang in Mexico who says, we're coming for you, you should be safe in Guatemala if that gang doesn't exist there, right? Yes, but the economy is worse. So what is the leftist legitimate argument against what Trump is doing? While I certainly feel like Trump and his administration are doing this to curb immigration, I don't really have any proof of that, although I think it's obvious. There's no real argument against sending people to Guatemala. If the left is going to argue, but the economy is better in America, So what? Asylum isn't based on whether or not the economy is better than another country. You can't just come here and be like, I want Buffalo Wild Wings, like some have said. Yeah, so in that case, could you imagine someone in Mexico coming to the border, being sent to Guatemala? Yeah, this will deter a lot of people. But I think it's fair to say, if you have a legitimate asylum claim and you can't go to Guatemala, they're not going to send you there. Because I'll tell you this, Trump is trying to win the battle, which means sending some asylum seekers into Guatemala who then get kidnapped or hurt is going to be really, really bad news for Trump, and it's going to disrupt his plans. So I'll put it this way. As far as I can see, I don't see a legitimate argument against what Trump is doing other than, like, I can point out I think it's an end run around the system, but at the same time, why would we insult Guatemala? Guatemala is dangerous for some people, not everybody. I know a lot of people who like Guatemala. I don't know, man. You let me know what you think, but I'll tell you this. Donald Trump and his team are crafty, to say the least. Thanks for hanging out. Stick around. Next segment will be coming up at tomorrow at 10 a.m., but I believe I will have a live stream tonight. I'm going to aim for 8 p.m., so maybe sooner. Maybe it'll be before this video goes up. I don't know. I'll aim for 8 p.m., but I should be live. I'm going to try and keep it not too long because I went nuts the other day with like a 3-hour stream and I almost lost my voice, so it may or may not happen. But if it does, it'll be at youtube.com/TimCastIRL, where I'm slowly ramping up a new show. Stick around, and I will see you all then.